To the border on iHeartRadio today. Also, AMFM247.com, 50 plus AM/FM stations across the country and around the world. We have got a great guest with us today. He joins us live here on our big broadcast. The fantastic Jack Cashill is with us. Jack, welcome to the broadcast. How are you, sir?
Hey, James, I'm doing great, and thanks for having me on the show.
So, tell me a little bit about your background, my friend, and then we'll get into the topic here.
Well, I actually have the perfect background to write this book because I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, which is the poster child for urban dysfunction. Still is, 60s and 70s. And I watched my neighborhood collapse around me. Some years later, I went back and I worked for the Newark Housing Authority. And I saw just how wrecked the whole city had become in such a short period of time. And since then, I've gone on to become an author. I've written 15 books, and I have a PhD in American Studies. I get to study it from another perspective. But it dawned on me that no one could tell this story better than I could. And I was sitting on it for many years. And finally, I got the opportunity to tell it.
We have got a great guest with us today. He joins us live. Jack Cashill is with us. Untenable, the true story of white ethnic flight from American cities. And this is just an amazing, amazing book. Tell me a little bit about your writing process, Jack.
Well, it's the book I've been wanting to write for a long time, and it's in large part memoir. So it's a very readable book, and people, just as a literary kind of level, it's kind of fun and readable, even though the topic is very serious. But what I did with this is I started calling people, and for me, it was a good experience because I hadn't talked to a lot of these people for 40, 50 years. These are the kids I grew up with. And I talked to at least 50 or so people. And they all told them some variation of the same story. And that story, I'll attribute to the guy who gave the book his name, my good friend Artie. We grew up in the same block. We're buddies. In 1960 or so, our block was idyllic. I mean, people use that term one after another. It was a perfect little organic, harmonious, functioning, happy neighborhood with all kinds of shops, movie theaters, everything you can want. By early 70s, it was unlivable. And I said to Artie, I said, you and your widowed mother, the last of my friends out to leave the block. I said, and he's a Democrat, too, so he's kind of arguing against interest here. I said, why finally did you leave? And he said, well, Jack, it became untenable. And I said, well, Artie, what do you mean by untenable? He said, well, when your home's invaded for the second time, that's untenable. When your mother's mugged for the second time, that's untenable. And you take Artie's story and multiply it by 1 million and apply it to cities throughout the Northeast, North Central United States, even into California, and you have the story of white ethnic flight. It's just been mistold, that story, for the last 60 years.
We have got a great guest with us today. Jack Cashill is with us. Untenable is the latest from him, and he joins us today here on our big, big broadcast. We have got a fantastic guest with us today. So what's the most common myth about authors, my friend?
The most common myth about authors is that we're in it for the money. I left a career in advertising to become an author. That was when I was in it for the money, No, I'd say that's the most common myth. The other myth is the idea most people have that they could do it themselves. And a lot of people can do it themselves. It's just that it takes a lot of focus, a lot of dedication. And at the end of the day, and this is the hardest part, James, at the end of the day, no matter what business we're in, we're all salesmen. We're all knocking on doors, trying to close a sale. So, and that's the part of the story, the part of the sequence that I both like most and dislike most at the same time.
We've got Jack Cashill with us today, Untenable. He joins us live here on our big broadcast. So take me through your writing process. Did you use an outline? Did you use notes? How'd you bring this book to life, Jack Cashill?
I was very lucky in a lot of ways because I didn't have a set outline. I was going to tell that chronologically. I was starting with my childhood, and then jumping back to the year I spent working for the Housing Authority of Newark, which came later, and to just paint a whole picture of what how a city collapses, what causes it to collapse. And especially I wanted to focus on what happens to the people who are forced to flee. I mean, for 60 years, these people have been ignored. In fact, they've been scolded and blamed for fleeing. They were making the decisions that any sane, responsible parent would make, and yet they were being scolded by the media for making those decisions. So blacks, Hispanics, Asians, everyone left under the same circumstances, but only whites were singled out for blame. And it was partly to redress that, especially for my parents' generation, who really didn't have the means to redress it themselves. And fortunately, I've been able to, I have access to the media. I've been pretty successful author, so I get book contracts. And finally, I said, this is the book I want to write. And I had a little, twist some arms to get it done, but I got it done. And the response has been extremely heartwarming, I will say. People are saying, you're telling us our story. Thank you. We've been sitting on this story for years, and no one tells it. And now they're getting a chance to relive it through, my story.
Jack Cashill with us today. He joins us live here on our big broadcast. He has got an incredible book, Untenable, and he's with us today here on our big program. So, Jack, this book is incredibly well written. Talk to me a little bit about your research process and putting this whole thing together, my friend.
Well, just some breaks I have. One is I have my family genealogist. I have a cousin who's done great work on family genealogy, which made that part of it help. Another break I got came with they released censuses only after 72 years. And so in 2022, they released the 1950 census. I got to see what my neighborhood looked like just before we moved there. And it was a remarkable story just in that census. This is one block in Newark, New Jersey in 1950. There are 363 people in the block. There are 85 households. 83 of those 85 households have a married male head of household. It's a working class neighborhood. And they list the professions. Short of like lumberjack, there's not a single blue collar profession not listed among them. And if you went to that same block today, and this is at the heart of the story, you'd be lucky to find a handful of married heads of households, if that. And it's the collapse of the family in the city, and especially in the inner city, that has led to the urban blight we've seen for the last 60 years. It didn't have to happen, and someone should have blown the whistle on it a long time ago.
We have got the fantastic guest with us today. He joins us live. The fantastic Jack Cashill is with us. Untenable is the latest from him, and he joins us live here on our big program. So, Jack, can you take us through your journey to becoming a published author?
Yeah, I can. And it's, what I did is I was working in advertising, and it was about 1998, and I just sat down. I said, I've been writing for 20 years, for magazines and whatnot. But I said, can I write a book? Do I have it within me to write a book? And what I started to do was to, every morning for about 2 hours before I went to work, I'd work on a novel that I was writing. It's called 2006, Chautauqua Rising. In fact, it took so long, I had to move it back from 2003, Chautauqua Rising, to 2006. It was a slightly futuristic, slightly dystopian, upbeat kind of novel. And then I finished it, and I looked at it when I was finished, and my second step was, is this good enough to look for a publisher? Do I like it? And I said, yeah, this isn't bad. And then I went out and looked for a publisher, and this is the real hard part. If you're unpublished, you don't have an agent, you don't have a publisher, you have no track record, that's the big hurdle right there. And just through a pure fluke, I found a regional publisher that was just starting up in New York State, where the book is set, and they liked it, and they published it. It did well, and after the first one, everything else came a whole lot easier. The internet threw the doors open to a ton of information that I gave me as much reportorial, power as the entire New York Times newsroom. And unlike the New York Times, I wasn't tethered by orthodoxy or PC expectations. I could take any story I want and go with it. And that's And it's amazing the big stories they left on the table for me to cover. TWA Flight 800, Ron Brown's death. I mean, one big story after another were ceded to me. I was able to write books about them, and the books have done well, and the rest has been kind of history. Finally, I got the opportunity to write the book I really wanted to write, and that's Untenable.
We've got Jack Cashill with us today. He joins us live here on our big program. So, Jack, this book, incredibly well written. You put a lot of time and effort into the book. What do you want readers to take away from your writing?
I want them to see that the urban problems we have now, were not inevitable, and that they are fixable. It's not going to be easy, but it's got to take at least an understanding what the problem is. See, right now, we've been living off this myth of systemic racism for the last 50 years because it's easier than trying to solve the problems that cause urban collapse. We got to get beyond that. We just have to, and the problem is simple enough. It's really the collapse of the family, and it's taking place across all ethnicities today. We're seeing it in rural America among white Americans, among Hispanics, etc. And until we rectify that, we're seeing it in foreign countries, places like Ireland that never do that sort of thing just 20, 30 years ago. And no one's, no, I shouldn't say no one, but almost no one is willing to stand up and say, hey, this is a problem, and this problem needs to be addressed. And once it's addressed, it needs to be fixed.
We have got a great guest with us today. Jack Cashill is with us. Untenable is the latest from him, and he joins us this week here on our big broadcast. So do you have a preferred genre? Do you enjoy exploring different genres with your writings?
My preferred genre is memoir, and this is my opportunity to do that. And it's a pointed memoir. It's a memoir that weaves in and out, historical facts and some, sociological observations, etc. And so I moved from A to Z in my family's history, but I'm at the same time moving from A to Z in the life of American cities. And and I'm an optimist. In spite of all the evidence for reasons not to be, I still think I know I was born in the greatest country in the history of the world, and I have a hard time feeling sorry for myself because everything doesn't go perfectly right all the time. But we need to appreciate that and to live up to that expectation.
We've got a great guest with us today. He joins us live here on our big broadcast, Untenable. Jack Cashill with us today. So tell me a little bit about where you see this book going. What are some of your goals for this book, Jack?
Well, I've already achieved one goal, and that is just in the reader response, which has been so heartwarming. I mean, it's more so than I've written. This is my 15th, 17th book, and I've never gotten responses like this. Just really human thank yous. No one thanked me for writing TWA 800. I mean, it's which just came out on paperback also. But this is very personal. And where I'd like to see it go, this Sunday, for instance, my presentation for Book TV will air 4 times. So just check Book TV, C-SPAN for times. It depends on where you live, but it's throughout the day. It's very good of them to do that. It's a great service. I'd like to sell as many copies as I could. I mean, that's the ideal, but I'm content just reaching the people who need to be reached, reaching the people who will find in this book vindication, who will be able to share with their children and their grandchildren and say, hey, here's my story. 1 million people live the same story I did, and it'll give them a chance to open the eyes of those people who, as one reader said to me, goes, this is a book for people who can go home again to explain the fate of us who cannot. So the people, when our neighbors collapsed, there was no home for us to go home to ever. We've been nomads ever since. I mean, let's face it, we live nomads in a wonderfully productive, bountiful country. But that sense of estrangement from your own home is pretty profound, and it affects people, especially older people, a lot.
Jack Cashill with us today. Untenable is the latest from him, and he joins us this week here on our big program. So, Jack, before we let you go, how do people get the book and get involved with what you're doing online?
I would say online, just go to my website, cashill.com, CASHILL.com. I would recommend they buy it through Amazon because that's the way publishers keep score nowadays, not New York Times bestseller list. And it's available in ebook and an audiobook. I do my own read, which is hard, but I did it. And as well as, a hardcover regular book. But, I would appreciate it greatly, James, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about it.
Well, the book is amazing. I look forward to chatting with you soon. Untenable is available on Amazon. Jack Cashill has been our fabulous guest this week here on our big program. So, Jack, have yourself a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, sir.
Well, hey, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. James.
Appreciate it, my friend. There he goes, the fantastic Jack Cashill. We'll see you next week.